Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be in the world. Welcome to the Sensitive Stability BPD live show. For those of you who don't know me, I am your host. My name is Kevin Reynolds. I am a BPD survivor and a BPD coach. We go live here on TikTok Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. US EST, where we talk about a different topic related to borderline personality disorder. This morning, we're going to talk about relationships and BPD, just in general. And usually we'll go into very specific topics regarding relationships, but I kind of want to keep it broad today, sort of get us thinking about all the different dynamics of which go along with relationships. Thank you, Nicole. Good to see you guys. The relationship conundrum with BPD is more internal than most of us realize. The problems and complications, the things that we feel like we're not getting, the things that we feel like our partner's not doing, those feelings that it just won't work are most of the time, when it comes to this condition, internal structures. They're not as much external as you may think. It seems easy to be able to point a finger or blame someone else, right? Blame a circumstance. And circumstances and other people might be at fault to some degree. But as I always say, fault really has a large unconstructive property, and it keeps us feeling emotional about something to the point where we become stunted, frozen, isolated. We run from our problems. We don't address the more important facet of building a better relationship, which would come in the form of accountability. So, what is accountability? We talk about that a lot here. Forgive me if you're a regular, because you've heard me say it many times. But for those who may be new, so you don't know where people watching are coming from, accountability is what could I have improved upon? What could I have done better? You notice how there's no fault really in that ideology. There's no blame in that ideology. I'm simply looking at how I can improve my situation, how I can improve the situation. And those improvements don't involve me sacrificing parts of myself. They don't involve me losing dignity. They don't involve me risking rapport or reputation. They don't involve me walking on someone else's beliefs or opinions or core values, walking all over them. Um, what could I do better? What could I improve upon? Followed by the responsibility, which is the action. Thank you, Amanda. The action necessary to do whatever's required to own your accountability and make it better. And those are the foundations of a relationship working, two people wanting to be there and two people wanting to improve. Thank you, Michelle. We overlook these kinds of things, though, with this condition, BPD, and that is generated from a lack of self. Thank you, Jill. Most of the problems that you have in a BPD relationship boil down to a lack of self and exploited insecurities. When I say exploited insecurities, I don't mean intentionally exploiting, okay? Nobody's intentionally exploiting you most of the time. That's not true in all circumstances, of course, but most of the time. And I know that with BPD, we're not trying to exploit people either most of the time, right? There are those circumstances where maybe that's happening, but it's very rare. Even when you have someone for the partners out there and the parents out there who look at the situation, most of the time we're not intentionally doing anything. You know what I mean? It's all reactive. It's all in response to the environment. And that's not to say that we're not responsible or accountable for our actions. It's that we don't have other options. And that's why we end up picking these terrible responses. I assure you this, most of the time we are upset about it just as much as you're upset about it. Every time I picked a plant up and threw it against the wall, that's like a metaphor for like everything I've ever destroyed, which is like my whole damn life over and over again. You know what I mean? Physical stuff and otherwise. I didn't do it because I wanted to do it. I didn't do it on purpose. I mean, even those moments when I'm like, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to do it. I didn't have another option in my head. I hadn't been taught how to handle my emotions the right way. I hadn't been taught how to handle disappointment, somebody being disappointed in me. I hadn't learned how to cope with the world around me the right way. I didn't have the ability to walk myself through my own thoughts, or my emotions, but my thoughts as well were compromised by the condition. That time that I print out those divorce papers and sign them and fling them in your face. I don't even care. Go ahead and sign them. I'll file them right now. Kind of like making you think that I really hope you sign them. You know what I mean? They really think I want to do that, really, and look like that, look like how I'm behaving. Reflect on that in the future and say, "Man, that was so immature." No, I didn't want to do that. If I really wanted to divorce somebody, I mean, I wish that I would have had the time to like really make it right, right? For things the easy way, the way that's kind to everybody involved. But I didn't have those kinds of skills. I didn't have those kinds of perspectives, and thus the relationship suffered. Those of you may have who are regulars may know that I released a book recently. This book is The 21 Golden Rules for Conquering BPD. It is for the person with BPD, but I also released the second book this last week. We haven't really talked about it much here, but it is The 21 Golden Rules for BPD Relationships. Okay. This book is meant specifically for relationships and BPD, not just for the person with BPD. It's for both people. Hence the word relationships. It's on Amazon, just like the other one. It's an easy read, just like the other one. The rules are to the point. If one person follows the rules, the relationship will massively improve, whether you're the partner or the person with BPD. You set the example first, right? If both people follow the rules, even better. But the point of the book was to give you guys something to focus on to help improve the relationship on a daily basis. There's a rule for just about anything that you will come up with in the book. But I suggest read one rule a day kind of thing. And if you like it, leave us a review, because I'll tell you what, the biggest way that you can help other people here is by bringing them into our community. You know what I mean? So the more reviews, the better. I hate to say it, but that's kind of like that's the blood life of our entire operation here of trying to get rid of this condition for the world. Skydive says, why would a BPD man, I guess, get into another relationship with baggage and commitment issues from X? So why would somebody get into a relationship when they haven't gotten over their baggage, when they haven't gotten over their past? Somebody with BPD in particular is prone to going from relationship to relationship. I did it. Okay. Furthermore, Sky says, I was in a relationship with a BPD woman. I got you, woman, not man. Sorry about that. And she ended the relationship recently. And then I presume maybe got into another one, or maybe she had gotten into the one with you, whatever it may be. We struggle with being alone. We struggle with our insecurities of not being good enough. And this condition being founded in those lacks of self mean that we tend to pursue other people to feel good enough. So if things are rocky with one relationship, things aren't looking good with one person, our BPD mind will very easily try and place the blame on that isolated experience, whether it's the person or the idea of the relationship in general. And then we look for the next place that's willing to give us that oxytocin that we need to temporarily feel good enough. Obviously, it doesn't work long term. Obviously, there's patterns, but we don't typically see that in the moment, you know? And the honeymoon period that starts in a new relationship is one of those things that just massively pumps you up to where you might not feel like you do all the time, like we do with BPD. And I'm sorry to hear that, Sky. I really am. It's not easy being with somebody, and most people overlook how difficult it is for the partners and the support system. It is just as tough. It's a different suffering, but just as tough. Good morning, M. M says, why can't I let go when I know I need to, but I can't? I feel like I can't be without this person. That sounds like you've developed the favorite person complex. This is an intense emotional attachment to one person, and you have basically placed all of your self-worth into that person. If they don't want you, if they reject you, if they're not giving you the certain type of attention, affection that you need, then it reflects on yourself with this condition until you fill yourself. The center of self is composed of three parts: self identity, knowing who you are; self image, how you feel about yourself; and self validation, the ability to feel that basic human right of being good enough. Someone asks, how can someone tell the difference between BPD versus ADHD versus autistic meltdowns? Okay, so we'll speak largely from the BPD perspective because it is a BPD show. The distinguishment between all of the things out there and BPD, BPD is a personality disorder derived on a set of disordered personality traits. Personality traits are behavioral patterns. Behavioral patterns were habits. Habits started out as one thing that you did as a coping mechanism, generally speaking, or in response to something that was, in this case, largely out of your control, because we're talking about the meltdowns, right? And when somebody says, oh, he's a hothead, that's because I've developed such a reputation for my meltdowns. Thank you, Tara. That I have identified with that response pattern so much that other people can recognize it and say, well, he's a hothead. You see? So those personality traits are our coping mechanisms. They are our survival tactics. Okay. And we also have the fear of abandonment, very extreme fear of abandonment, amongst some other things, unstable relationships and all that. And that need to fill the lack of self, of which is also symptomatic. Um, and that's the difference. When the meltdowns are not, when they are our internal need to fill that lack of self with the outside world, and that's a meltdown, that's usually from the BPD side. Just Jaxie. Good morning, Jaxie. Welcome to the show. Having a full BPD meltdown, really battling. Well, look, here's one thing I'm going to say is this. Half of the meltdowns are chemical. So part of getting past it faster is accepting that half of the process is only going to be resolved in time. It's very difficult for somebody with BPD because our fiery need to know that somebody's not going to leave us, thank you, user, will cause us to have these meltdowns with the intention of wanting to resolve it right away. Well, why can't we just talk about it now? No, 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 don't leave. Talk about it now. You can't go yet. How can you sleep like this after we fought? You know, all these kind of common tropes surrounding BPD. These are mechanisms of insecurities. So half of it is let's let the chemicals die. You're going to have to sit with some of the negative energy. You know what I mean? You just have to. There's no other way around that part. The chemicals must die down. The other half of it is how can I recover faster? When you're in a meltdown, it's already too late in terms of preventing the meltdown. But taking that step back, remembering things like episodes require audiences. You can have meltdowns alone, sure, but the general rule of thumb is episodes require audiences. So let's separate from the people that are involved. Thank you, Deja. Give them a chance to kind of reset while giving your chemistry a chance to reset, and then do the work in between and do the work coming out of it. Take the lesson from this so it doesn't keep happening. And when you look at the past, like a past episode, you need to be able to do it without the emotional content. Okay. Because looking at the past with yesterday's emotions attached to it is unproductive. The amygdala doesn't know the difference, and you'll just repeat history over and over again. You have to be willing to look at the last episode and say, yeah, I was pretty mean there. I did these things and I felt bad. You can list the emotions as a fact. You know what I mean? Without re-experiencing them. Someone asks, how can someone tell if they have BPD without the general signs, like avoidant relationships? Well, BPD is one of those, it's kind of like a chameleon in terms of manifestations. I have worked with over 1,200 of us, and I'll tell you what, it is one of the most diverse, versatile conditions out there. It'll manifest 1,000 different ways, and it can be very difficult to detect. Some people say, well, I don't know if I have BPD. And then they realize, well, maybe I have quiet BPD. You know what I mean? Some people are like, well, I think I have, intermittent explosive disorder, but they just have the extroverted episode type of BPD, right? Nobody gets to really help them dive deeper to figure out why, because they're so damn explosive. I was like that. That we think it's the alcohol, we think it's the anger, you know what I mean? It's like you can't get past the outward expressiveness of the condition. We do have a comprehensive self-assessment, which will give you a very, very good idea of how you might fit on this spectrum. It's going to ask you a bunch of questions. It only takes 5 minutes, but it'll ask you questions about triggers, about features, and about symptoms and other stuff. And it'll kind of jog your memory a little bit here in terms of the past behavior and make you really question yourself. It's in the resource center on our website. So there's a link to the resource center in the link tree here on TikTok. Just click my profile, click the link tree, go to the resource center, or you can go to sensitivestability.com and click the menu and find the resource center. Lots of free stuff there, guys. Jordan, good morning, Jordan. Why do BPD relationships with other BPD people not usually work out? Well, you have two fires. That the home that is your relationship has one flame and then another flame. That's double the flame, right? And these flames can kind of instigate one another. Now, I will say something though about that. I think that two cluster Bs together, any cluster B personality disorder, I think it could be one of the best relationships you could ever have. I think it could be very supremely satisfying, supremely healthy, supremely forward moving, stable, trustworthy, all of these things, right? Committed. But both people have to have that basic formula that I talk about all the time. And that's any relationship, by the way. Both people have to want to be there. Both people have to want change. They have to be willing to change. Okay. If you have both people willing to change and both people wanting to be there, the will to change can increase awareness. The will to change can develop motivation. The will to change can learn skills. A will to change can explore new perspectives. A will to change means hope. That's what that means. So if both people can get that, then we're in business. But remember, you can't control the other person. You just can't. You can't force them. You can't force them to change. Begging them is not going to help. If they get on board because you begged them, they're nowhere near ready yet. They have to see the light. You might say, well, how do I do that if my partner has no interest in getting better? The answer is setting the example. Okay. Setting boundaries, setting standards, and then sticking with them. It does not mean being mean. And I know why you're scared to do this. It's because you're risking the relationship. When you don't get on center stage with them, you are risking them not staying. I get it. I mean, it's unlikely that they will leave right away because you haven't stepped up there to fight with them. You don't know that yet because you never tried it. We feed into it and enable it without even realizing it. Even walking away, we don't set the firm boundaries necessary when they come chase or when they, it's the dynamics very complex. That's for sure. Stranger Ranger, good morning. What's the best thing to help someone who has BPD and won't get help? Perfect question. Right in time, Ranger. It is setting the example. You have to display the properties that a successful partner in a successful relationship display. You don't let yourself sink down to the behavior. Okay. They don't want to be doing the stuff they're doing. You know what's worse than that? You doing it too. And when you stay up here and you set your boundaries and you don't violate them, and boundaries are not meant to be mean or ugly. There are very easy ways to set boundaries that are soft, they're easier to take. You give them a chance to rise up to your level. Okay. But when I say you're risking the relationship, I mean it, because what if they don't? What if their awareness does not improve? Well, you can't let them anchor you back down, right? You can't do that. And I know that's scary. But if you're stuck like that, I think that's an internal problem too. And I think look at your own insecurities, look at your own stuff, and What pieces of the pie am I missing that keeps me trapped here? Why is this behavior acceptable to me? Why I allow myself? Well, and then we always let ourselves get off the hook with this one simple phrase, because I love them. If you really love them, then you help them the right way. You'll set the example and put them in a position where they're challenged and they might actually be able to improve. But if we keep giving in, they'll never improve. It's just how it is. Catherine, good morning, Catherine. Ended up in a hospital over the weekend as I had a full-on breakdown, not doing well. Well, Catherine, you're in the right place to be able to say that you're starting to do better. We talk about real truths when it comes to this condition. If you've seen the show before, I very rarely sugarcoat things. There are easier, nicer ways to say things, and I will do that to the best of my ability. But in reality, we've got to change. We can't keep doing the same stuff and expect a different outcome. Nothing changes if nothing changes, man. Thanks, Fred. Appreciate you, man. And I take that to heart. I mean, I really do with everything, everything. I've been a businessman my whole life. If a business isn't working, if something isn't working, well, I'm not going to make it work by doing the same thing. If my wife's not happy with me, I'm not going to make her happy by doing the same thing. And in a certain degree of, let me be clear about that. Her happiness is not my responsibility. My happiness is not her responsibility. But if she's not satisfied with me, you see, I'm not going to make her satisfied by doing the same thing. Now, maybe sometimes that's not appropriate, right? Somebody's asking for too much. Somebody's, requiring too much of you. You have to be willing to set the standard for yourself. Thank you, Christina. In terms of where your accountability is. And I'd be focusing right now on accountability. A lot of people go to the hospital with this condition. I did, you did, you know what I mean? Lots of us do. What do we learn from that? Are we feeling just guilty and down right now? Or are we going to look at it and just say, all right, so this was a domino in a long line of dominoes that had to fall for me to get to a place where I feel good. This was a necessary component. People look at failure so negatively, man. They look at it and they're just like, oh God, I'm so awful. I'm so terrible. I'm not good enough. Look, I messed up again. That was an experience point that you just earned. And you need a bunch of them to get to the next level. You can't just get to the next level. You need experience points to get there. How do you get those experience points? By trying and failing over and over again. I really hate using the Edison example. You know what I mean? So instead, I forget the name of the Harry Potter lady, but she got denied like 100 times with publishers for Harry Potter, guys. Harry Potter. Can you imagine being one of the publishers out there that turned Harry Potter down? Oof. That's a big domino to fall, right? That's a big failure step. Oh man. But it's the truth. It's the truth. And we look at failure with such disgust and disappointment. I wouldn't be talking to you right now if I didn't fail 50 billion times trying to make videos that might reach somebody. If you scroll to the bottom of my TikTok page from years ago, all those old videos are still up, and they all have problems with them. I wasn't clear enough. I wasn't loud enough. I wasn't authentic enough. I didn't expose enough of my heart. You know what I mean? I had to fail in order to finally help people see that my intentions are in the right place, and maybe there could be some help. And if you have a question or a comment and you'd like to be seen, please do tag Sensitive Stability Coach. This is my dear friend and business partner, our moderator, Amit. Thank you, Amit. Kitty Cat. Okay, so someone has asked, do you have a video on psych hospital stays with BPD, helpful or harmful? I don't. I thought about doing some videos on that, but I don't typically talk about that topic too much. Like in my head, there's like this little threshold, right? Where I can say a certain amount of stuff about a certain thing for a little while. And if I've said too much about it, I fear like a ban. You know what I mean? I fear the slap on the wrist from TikTok or whatever media platform. Um, and psych stays at the hospital are kind of in that bucket a little bit. But what I could say to you is things are what you make it. You know, I see plenty of people go to places like rehab and then they're in there like 8 times for like months at a time sometimes, and they come out and the problem isn't gone. And then I myself have done programs in time that I believe I would have gotten more out of if I was in the right mental space, if I was in the right headspace for it, or had the right awareness. And I think awareness has a whole hell of a lot to do with whether or not something like a hospital stay will be helpful. Issuing a blanket statement on that would be irresponsible because there's a lot of different hospitals, there's a lot of different programs, there's a lot of different mental health professionals, there's a lot of different systems, therapy models. People are different. You're different than I'm different, and everybody's different, you know? So it's kind of how it is, right? And awareness is different, obviously. Somebody asks if I believe uh, growing up with a narcissist, if I believe growing up with narcissistic parents causes or increases the likelihood of BPD. I think it massively increases the likelihood of BPD and cluster B in general. The conditions that we're talking about here, narcissistic personality disorder, histrionic personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder, and of course, borderline personality disorder, BPD, um, have a generational component. They do have a genetic component. Okay. Not every time, but a lot of the times. It is extremely common. Probably 75% or more of the people that I work with one of these conditions, their parents had one of these conditions or their parents' parents. You know what I mean? Caitlin, Caitlin, Caitlin's journey. Oh, Caitlin's journey. Can a lot of yelling and neglect cause BPD? Any type of abuse. Abuse is an etiological factor. It doesn't have to be obvious abuse. Everybody thinks that, you know, when you say trauma, childhood trauma leads to BPD. First off, it doesn't just have to be childhood trauma. It can be activated later in life. But that being said, people jump to the worst with trauma. They think the worst things, but trauma could be much simpler than that. It could be being denied any time with one particular parent. Now, I had a number of traumas, and those of you who know me may know some of those traumas. Some of them I can't talk about on lives, but I'm happy to share in private. You know what I mean? So please do reach out to me if you'd like to learn more about how to get out of this, or, you know, understand me better and how I did it. Shoot me an email, shoot me a DM, and I personally respond to all my emails. So, but anyway, some of my trauma was simply me trying to ask for time with my father. You see what I mean? Just asking him for time, and not this weekend, not that weekend, not now, you know, and it turned out it was never. Turned out it was never. That's traumatic, you know, but that's not yelling. But I did experience yelling too, you know what I mean? So it's a whole spectrum of trauma that can contribute to this. Dia asks about EMDR and my views or perspective on that. So the idea of eye movement therapy triggering some type of relief for trauma, there's some real credence behind that. I have studied many different therapy models that are used for BPD. Just finished my draft for my entire dissertation last night. Been working on that for years, so that's cool, right? But in that dissertation, I go over a lot of different therapy models, and one of them is EMDR. My perspective is this: I have seen people who work with me have done EMDR before they come to me or during or whatever. Hey, Mal, thank you. And I think it helps with the trauma stuff sometimes. I say sometimes because it's like anything. You get out of it what you put into it. If you go in there thinking, I'm skeptical, you're probably not going to get that much out of it. If you go in there and you say, you know what do I have to lose? I mean, seriously, what do I have to lose? This person wants to, you know, use this light and, you know, it doesn't really matter what the setup is, and not even EMDR, but something else, right? Some other type of therapy model. If you go in there with the attitude that I want to take from this something good, then you probably will get something good out of it. Do I think that it's going to fix all of it? I have not met anybody who has done EMDR and then come to me and said, this solved my BPD. Okay. I have had people say that about DBT. Not many, but I had some people say that about DBT though. And I'll be honest about my DBT programs when I did them, because I did over 4,000 hours of therapy, and some of those were intensive DBT programs. I didn't have the right headspace for it to work, and the way that it's structured, I don't, using people who largely don't have BPD to deliver it. I'm not sure that they would have been able to pull me into the right headspace. I mean, clearly not, or it would have happened. But there are different mental health professionals doing this all around the world. So, you're the person you're working with, the facility, whatever it may be. These variables matter. You know what I mean? It's not just your headspace. Anyway, so, and for those of you who don't know, I do run a program called the BPD remission program, of which helps people get to remission. Another question is, as a real therapist, seek your own counseling, not a coach. Well, to each their own. That's how I feel about that. I saw a lot of therapists. That's the truth. And if there was somebody out there who could have saved me, then I would have been saved. In fact, the whole reason that I went coaching is to resolve what I felt to be a lacking marketplace. I mean, it was like a bunch of people who really need help, and there really didn't seem to be the right type of help from my perspective. I am well qualified to go therapy, and I didn't go therapy for a number of different reasons. One, I'm not a mandated reporter. Two, I didn't like the stigma behind, the fears that come with that, not wanting to tell the authentic truth. I had a lot of issues going into these places. I couldn't be honest, is how I felt. And thus it was hard for me to get the help. But I also I felt a lot of things, and I'm not trash talking therapy. I have a therapist that I will see, a couple times a year. I'll schedule something when I have heavy loads of stress and I want an objective third place to dump this on and have like a cathartic release and somebody give me some objective feedback. I think it's very healthy. But what I do is far different than therapy. Very different. I am much more hands-on. I do 24/7 tech support. I share my experiences and stories, and I fully expose myself in the process. Something that I haven't found in therapy myself. So that's what I do. What I do. Uh, and that said, hey, what I'll say is, if something's working for you, keep doing it. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter what it is or what the letters are. If it's doing something for you and you're getting something out of it, and it's healthy, right? Because we have a lot of unhealthy coping mechanisms as well. I'm not telling you don't take that advice and apply it to this. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I'm talking about. If something is healthy and it's working, great, right? Caitlin says, what should I do when the really intense emotions hit? Well, the emotions are the first place where you can really interject. You can learn how to get over the triggers, but if you haven't learned how to get over the triggers yet and the triggers occur, right, then you're gonna have the emotional content. That's not avoidable. Now, the emotions are the first indicator that if you don't handle them, you're going to be giving control to the brain, to the emotions, in which case the symptoms develop, and then eventually they bash into each other enough for the consequence zone. I have an emotional tank draining tool that I program that's completely free. It is in the resource center I talked about. It is specifically designed to help you out of the high emotional content, better understand it, identify what triggers are actually present, because we often overlook the real triggers. The real triggers, there's not that many of them. There's about 14 to 16 of them or so. You probably have about 8 to 12 of them, right? And these are the things that create the emotion, and these are the things that lead to the symptoms. But when you walk yourself through what's going on and you start dismantling your emotional tank, as I call it, and you do it correctly, you'll be able to drain some of that energy before it gets to the place of explosion. I usually suggest starting with the lowest emotional content first. So let's say you'll see this in the tank. There's a link directly to it in the link tree in my profile here. Again, if you're on Spotify or YouTube, you can just go to the website, sensitivestability.com, click the menu, click the resource center, and then you'll see the emotional tank. It's going to ask you to list your emotions and then rate them. You can only hit 100% before you explode. So it kind of forces you to quantify what you're actually experiencing. I might say, for instance, okay, my wife's angry. I didn't do the dishes in time, right? So I feel, you know, some anger myself because I work really hard. How could you expect whatever, right? Doesn't matter the reason. So I feel anger. I feel sadness, maybe because I'm being overlooked or whatever. And I feel anxiety because I don't know where the relationship's going to go because of this incident, right? Because that's kind of how we think with BPD sometimes, the catastrophe, the worst case. And then the tool will ask you to rank these things. So I might say like 15% anxiety, like 25% sadness, maybe like 40% anger. And then it's going to ask you why you feel each of these things. Maybe I felt disrespected, unappreciated compared to someone else, not good enough, right? Something like that. And then it's going to tell you to start with the easiest one. Because if you can get that 15% anxiety to go away, you're that much less, you know, you don't have the explosion as frequently, right? We want to lower the easiest one first, kind of like a credit card. When they say when you're in massive credit card debt, you focus on the smallest debt first, and work your way up to the big one. Same philosophy. Can you repin this one by Brooke Emmett? Sorry, man. All right, starting an intensive outpatient thing for BPD and addictions, but I'm not the best at communicating any tips. Yes, one of the things I would say is this. I was really scared to be to be honest with somebody trying to help me. And if I would have been more honest, thank you, Vitality. Thank you, Red. If I would have been more honest, I A would have realized who couldn't help me faster, and B, I might have gotten more help than I received. I don't know the extent of which each individual may be able to help you. That's going to be different for who you're talking to. But I would say be as honest as you can. If not, if you can't manage to get it out with them, then at least be honest with yourself. Nobody's in your mind with you. You can at least sit down and have an authentic, honest conversation entirely with yourself, right? And then try to focus on the smallest things that you can fix. I know that it's overwhelming. I get it, especially when you throw addictions in. I studied addictions as a minor focus for both of my graduate programs, BPD being the main focus, because I suffered so tremendously from it. That was another thing I was having trouble with. I didn't want to be honest about the drinking. I didn't want to be honest about, you know, the substances. I would literally be in like sometimes when I did it, telemedicine, right? Telehealth, I would literally be drinking while I'm talking to a therapist. And I'd be like, yeah, no, I'm doing no drinking here. You know what I mean? It's like I couldn't, I had to hide a lot of the SH, the harming oneself and all that, the SI, the thinking about the end and all that kind of stuff. I didn't feel comfortable with these things, but I wish I would have been. You don't have to be so crass and scary about it, but I wish I would have been honest about it. I wish I would have been completely transparent. And I was scared. I was scared of getting reported. I was scared of, all the risks that come with that, getting judged. But if we can't get over the fear of judgment when we're talking to our mental health professional, I mean, that's a real tough place to be. And I find it hard to believe that that person will get better faster. I think that they will have a bunch of hurdles and struggles. So let go of the judgment part, and I think that will start solving your problem. And if you can't, there's a reason why you would need to investigate that more. And feel free to reach out and email me. I do personally respond to all my emails, and I'd love to help any way I can. Good morning, V. As a psych student, I absolutely agree with you. It's one of my many frustrations with the process. And I know, I really thought about becoming like a licensed counselor. I just couldn't do it because my experience with them was how I'm describing. I mean, it's not that they're bad people or that they don't care, but they do have a license to lose. And they do have limitations, and they need to have certain boundaries. And they're boundaries that like I just couldn't have in my program, I just couldn't have as a part of what I do. I have to fully expose myself. You know what I mean? And the rest of the world has a great deal of trouble understanding BPD. They really do. The stigma is very high. It's very tough. Um, but there are good mental health professionals out there, and there are people who have things to offer you. You know, you just have to be willing to expose yourself to other people's opinions and ideas. It does help if they understand it to the point where they've experienced it, because then maybe they can relay it in a little bit more sensitive way. And you hearing their matching experiences and stories build camaraderie. And those are the things I like about what I do. I like to build the camaraderie. I like to be a part of it with you. I like to be in the trenches. And I want you to know that that's where I am with you. And then I'm going to stay there when you stumble and fall. I'm not going to abandon you. Right. Wanda says, yes, I felt like I couldn't be completely honest about splitting with my therapist. I couldn't either. And I hate that. And I'm sorry about that. You know what I mean? I really am. I mean, I wasn't even able to be honest with myself, to be transparent about it. Uh, and for that to fix, I mean, I would have had to have an extreme awareness boost. And I think the biggest awareness boosts that I have had in my life are when I find something that's relatable and authentic. The relatability and the authenticity are what make magic happen. That's what makes epiphanies happen faster. And epiphanies are what you need. I tried practicing all the skills, but I still carried the pain. I had to have perspective changes, you know? Those were important. Sarah Maria. Good morning, Sarah Maria. Do you have a tip or something for caring too much about what someone thinks, says, or feels about? So, about you or something you think, right? You know, opinion. Yes, when it bothers you to the degree that it changes how you feel about yourself, it tells you it's an internal problem. It really has nothing to do with the fact that your partner or your parent or your friend or your coworker or your boss or your teacher or whoever has a different opinion. Because I know from the surface we can all agree that everybody deserves the right to an opinion, right? But where do we throw that out the window? We throw that out the window often when that opinion does not align with our opinion. And then why is it so important for us to right fight and to try and convince this person that they're wrong and we're right, or they don't see it our way? Or, well, why is that so important to do? It's because if you could just convince this person that you're right, then you'd be good enough, because then they'd be validating you. Think about the logic on that. This person who I believe is wrong, I need to convince them that I'm right so that they validate me so that I know I'm right. What? It makes no sense, but that's how we live, though. You see what I mean? We literally function that way. We function as though I need other people to believe in me in order to believe in myself. I need other people to agree with me in order to agree with myself fully. That's ludicrous. I live now much differently. One of the perspective changes I have is maybe there's some value to this other opinion. Let me explore that. No value. I'm still glad I collected the data. I'm still glad it's in my arsenal. I'm still glad I better understand the way this person thinks and why. Because I did spend my time shooting their idea down. I spent my time analyzing their idea. Somebody says something I don't like. I analyze why I don't like it, and I analyze why they do. I collect as much data as I can about that scenario. And then I understand their pain points. Why is it that they want to do it this way? Why is it that they have that opinion? Why is it that this matters to them? Why is this emotional to them? Now, what's going to get me more likely towards a decent compromise where both of us are happy? It's going to be if I understand that person better. My wife comes in, she's pissed off about how this happened. You know, I hang the pictures the wrong way on the walls. Well, you know, I thought this looked good. She doesn't. Why? And why is it important to her? And why is it not as important to me? Is it as important to me? That's a good question. Do I care about this as much? Or am I going to let the fact that she thinks that I hung the pictures in the wrong order affect how I feel about myself? Is that really like sensible? Or should I first stop and say, why is this important to her? You know, the flow of the house, the way it looks, the comfort level she has in rooms that I typically don't even spend time in. Why is that mattering to me so much? Can't I just back off a little bit? Turns out I don't care that much where I live. That's why I live in the city. I hate the city. I don't like the city. I hate it. But my wife loves it. And I argued with her in the beginning of our relationship about this. You don't even care. You don't care where I want to live, da, da, da. But I don't care that much, it turns out. I might not want to live in the city, but it sure the hell means more to her than it does me. That's not a hill I die on. You know what I mean? We'll live in the city, babe. That's okay. And then I'm not resenting her for it because I identified the weight of my core value with that, right? And then I saw hers as way up here and I love her. I'll give you that. I might argue for something else, right? Good morning, Deja. I love smoking green, but I think it's ruining my recovery chances. There's a difference between smoking a little bit on the weekend kind of thing and doing it every day, all day long, like I was doing. I was going crazy. And if it wasn't that, it was something else. I'd just leave one thing for the next thing, for the next thing, for the next thing. And that whole obsessive nature, excuse me, that we have with BPD, that doesn't go away in remission. It turns into like an inspirational dedication, ambition, right? So part of the journey is identifying things that are worth spending your time on, worth investing into. And let's say that you had a job that was 40 hours a week and it was in the medical industry. You're working with patients. You can't smoke then. That naturally diminishes the amount you smoke. And it also builds how you feel about yourself at the same time. It creates good validation, right? So I would encourage you to steer clear of the quick, easy answers and look for some of the things that are a little more meaningful. And it doesn't all have to be just like a drag, like work. I mean, you could become a part of a sports team. You could become part of some hobby or, club or something. Maybe the social life needs to change a little bit. But we need some goals. We need reasons to get up. That's what creates a life that's anxiety free, is having purpose and value. And you get that from doing things that people do who have purpose and value. And when we take the instant gratification and sacrifice the long-term self-respect, then we end up in a position where we're not reaching our potential. But I believe in you. You show up here every day, basically. I believe in you. You could do this. If I could do it, I'll say it that way. Karina's. Good morning, Karina's. Why do people with BPD tend to stock or keep tabs on stock? Yeah, like stock or keep tabs on loved ones. So this goes back to the same lack of self, and the idea is if I could identify a reason why this person left me, if I could identify a reason why this person doesn't like me, thanks, Taser, thanks, Fred. If I could identify something that would justify this to avoid the accountability of having to focus on my center of self, or I could see them come back, something like that, then I don't have to worry about the fact that I don't feel good enough and I can't validate. I would say that it has a lot to do with that. Good morning, Jenna. Welcome to the show. Why do people with BPD tend to... Oh, we just did this one. I could have sworn that was a new one. I guess you just repinned it for me. Sorry, man. Anyway, yeah, that lack of self, though, is one of the biggest reasons as to why we end up in these kinds of situations. And it's not as easy as just deciding that you're going to love yourself. You have to do things that somebody who loves themselves does. Start by trying to treat yourself like somebody you care about. Most of us don't do that. Most of us treat everybody else better than we treat ourselves. And you ever heard the phrase, you got to put your own oxygen mask on first before you put on other people's? Kind of that situation. Good morning, Sarah, and welcome to the show. Finally called 999, which is kind of like 911 for the UK, right? For mental health team, and told them, they said, yeah, we're all so busy. So I end up, harming myself in the process. Well, Sarah, here's the deal. Nobody can really stop you from doing what you want to do. Nobody can really stop you from doing those things, even if they had responded, and then a certain amount of that is, and I hate saying this part because I'm really not trying to throw you under the bus here. I'm trying to help best I can. There's something called inappropriate accountability that we place on the outside world with this condition. This person didn't do this, so I did that. This person doesn't do this, so I do this. This person doesn't respond fast enough, so I do that. But it's inappropriate to place that demand on them. And I know that you're thinking if they really cared, if somebody would care, then they'd come. But you ever heard of Mel Robbins? If not, I suggest you look her up. She's a great motivational speaker, businesswoman, really great person. She released a book called Let It Go recently. Very good book. And one of the things she says is no one's coming. We think that there's somebody who's going to swoop in like a hero to save us, but there is nobody to save Batman. And because you feel these intense emotions the way you do, you think it's a curse, but it's really a blessing in disguise. You just have to learn how to use it to help the world around you. And then you realize I was put here to make the world a better place, and nobody saves Batman. It's a whole rule in my book about it. No one saves Batman. Batman saves the world. You could do this, but we got to look internally and figure out why we're in outsourcing how we feel about ourselves into the outside world and how we can fix that. Lynn says, in a hospital setting, how can healthcare professionals help BPD folks get the help they need? You guys got some really good questions this morning. I love the way that we're thinking here because it's like you guys are seeing the big picture. There's a big mission. The entire industry. This is where I'm moving to. I'm not going to be coaching forever, probably end of spring, early summer, and then I'm transitioning into training doctors and therapists. So that's like the perfect question for the direction I'm moving in, right? I think that people in hospital and mental health settings, the professionals out there, need to have a more firm grasp of, and this part sucks because it's very hard to do, the perspective of someone who's in the position that the BPD person's in. We often look at the surface level problems and try and find surface level answers. They're arguing with their partner. We'll say something like, we'll take space and time the next time an argument gets heated. But we don't explain what space and time means. So people with BPD have very high chemical responses to things. That space isn't going to be enough. That time isn't going to be enough unless the work's done in the meantime to help counteract those chemical imbalances, right, at the time. And what I mean by doing the work is teaching ideas of accountability over guilt, blame, shame, and embarrassment, right? Teaching the idea of responsibility, action over the blame cycle. Teaching what the cycle is and how to identify where you are in the cycle, that the triggers are all the same. Mental health professionals that I've worked with and that I've seen, for example, they'll ask me surface level questions to surface level problems. I'll come in there and say, I argued with my partner. This is what happened. We'll say, well, how did you feel about that after you heard her say this? And I'll tell them, but I'm not connecting the dots. I need to learn that every surface level problem I have is one of 14 triggers. You know what I mean? And once you start handling why disrespect really bothers you so much at a core level, you might not feel disrespected as much anymore. Good morning, Amanda. Good to see you as always. Any advice on seeking an updated psychological evaluation, please? I first would say, what would be the purpose, because I sought many different analyses, many different diagnoses, many different, I would be in there all the time. You know what I mean? And I'd be trying to get them to give me reports, all sorts of different testing and whatever. When I look back, I mean, was it useful? Somewhat, yes. But the way that I spent so much of my time trying to get better, just looking for things like that, just looking for diagnostic tests and, progress reports and new diagnoses and trying to figure out what was wrong with me, I could have been focusing on the real mechanics that went into why my behavior was the way it is. So I'd say the first question really is why, you said I think there's something other than BPD going on. So that's worth it, because you see, if BPD doesn't have it, there's no medicine that will treat BPD, but there are medications for things like bipolar, for instance, anxiety, depression. Now, granted, some of these meds are not meant to be permanent solutions. They can most certainly help in the interim. And if it's something more permanent, then that would be the way to go about that. I would say be honest. Be honest. We're afraid to tell the truth. You know, we're going into the doctor shouldn't be so scary. People go in there and they're like, I don't want to seem like I'm just trying to get an Adderall prescription. I mean, but I'm like, who cares if you heard of Adderall and have ADHD and think that that might help? Why can't you just say that? Well, because you're afraid they're not going to give it to you because, abusive tendencies. Well, look at that. Look at that fear. Why do you have that fear? You know what I mean? It's like there should be no shame in going in there and saying, hey, something's not right. I know I have BPD, but I think maybe is there medicine that could help? Is there this that could help with some of these things, like some of these symptoms? Do you think maybe I have bipolar as well? I've always been under the assumption that if you have BPD, it's kind of at the top of that pyramid and the rest just sort of dissipates as you resolve it. But there are real physiological and biological things of which may need medicine. So don't shy away from that. And if the person you're talking to doesn't feel like they're responding well to your honesty, there's a bunch of other mental health professionals out there. Don't give up. Find the right one for you. Janice, good morning, Janice. Is it a healthy choice to work in a psych hospital if you're a BPD? Well, there's probably better options and worse options. I think there's pros and cons to everything. So a lot of us end up working for ourselves. Like that's how I ended up an entrepreneur. I couldn't work for other people. You know what I mean? So I was too much of a hothead, too reactive, too impulsive. I'd quit too quickly, all these kinds of things. So it was very tough for me. But I think one of the pros of working in the psych industry, if you have BPD, is that you're exposed to it more. And when you see other people's things, it's one of the reasons this show works so well because you see other people's questions and then I give you my perspective on their question and you may not have noticed this about yourself. You're learning stuff yourself, right? So I think there's a pro there. Um, I think it may be a little triggering. If it depends on your awareness, though. If your awareness is very high, then you could probably deal with that and it'd probably be a plus for you, I would say. Plus, it's very rewarding to be helping people with something like this. Also, it makes you more relatable because you understand things like this better. So you're also more understanding. I think if it's a passion, then you need to pursue it. And the answer is, how do I just pursue it and make it successful? Hey, Rennie, good to see you. When I have 3 days off in a row, sometimes I can't sleep for more than 3 hours. Well, maybe you're really excited to have those days off. I go through phases with sleep, in my life, but generally speaking, I have about 3 to 5 hours of sleep a night on average, usually about four. And it's always been that way. But when I have days off, I don't like to sleep on my days off because I'm like, oh man, I don't get days off these days. I do 24/7 tech support, 365 days a year. And I have for a couple of years now, legitimately. But when I'm done with this, the coaching part of it, and I'm moving into training the therapists and the doctors, I won't be doing 24/7 tech support. My sleep will probably change a little bit. I'll probably be sleeping 5 or 6 hours for a few months, but right now, if I happen to have a day off, like from sessions, right? I don't like to sleep. Like on the weekends, I don't do sessions. I don't sleep. I like life. I like to be awake. So everybody's different. And your circumstances will change your routine, not just your sleep, but all routine. That said, guys, we are hitting the end of our live show this morning. I want to remind you that we go live here on TikTok Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. US EST. We also post all the lives to YouTube and Spotify, so there's no excuse for not getting better. Thanks, Fred. Appreciate all your help. Also, check out our new book, 21 Golden Rules for BPD Relationships. It is available on Amazon. You'll learn a whole lot about making your relationship a whole lot better. I appreciate everybody here. And I love all the help that you guys provide in the chat. The regulars, when you see the questions come up and you know the answers and you understand it and you've heard us talk about it, helping out and letting some of the newer people know. And for those who are new here, you're in the right place. You won't find a more comprehensive, detailed analysis of the BPD traits from somebody who experienced it. So come back tomorrow and we'll get better together. Okay. Have a good day, guys.